When I was a child growing up, man, we loved the Muppet shows and movies and specials. And two of the characters on the Muppet shows were these two old guys named Statler and Waldorf. And it seems like whatever happened in their situation in the storyline, these two guys always had something to complain about. And it was kind of the comedy relief, right? It kind of brought some humor to the situation. But in real life, man, complaining all the time is not all that funny. But man, we as a church are so good at complaining. And we always have something, it seems like, to complain about. That if a church community gathers in an auditorium, we say, oh no, that's too modern. If the church community gathers in cathedrals or old buildings with stained glass windows, we say, oh no, that's too ancient. If the praise band is loud and rocking, then we say, whoa, that's too contemporary. But if there's an organ or a piano singing the old hymns, we say, oh no, that's too old, that's too old-fashioned. If they read from the Bible in a modern translation, we complain and say, oh, these modern translations aren't trustworthy. But if we read from the older ones, we say, nobody talks like that anymore, right? No matter what we do, it seems like there's something for someone to complain about. And as the Christmas season has come, man, it seems like this is coming in a new way, in a fresh idea, right? That because Christmas Day this year falls on a Sunday. And this debate has come up, and I've participated in this and talked with people about this, that, is it okay for churches to celebrate and have services on Christmas Day? Some church communities have canceled their services and said, hey, be with your family. And others have said, no, we're not going to stop worshiping God and having our services because of the holiday. What better way to worship God and honor Him than having a church service? Others are doing other things like Christmas Eve services or, meeting on a Thursday or a Friday to give people the weekend. And no matter what option a church community chooses, somebody is there to complain about it and say that's not right. And the good news is this debate didn't just happen this year. The church has been wrestling since its beginning over what day is right to worship. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, churches, that were mostly Jewish would say, oh no, we have to worship on the traditional Sabbath, right? Sundown on Friday till sundown on Saturday. And that's the right time to worship God, because that's what the law of Moses says. And all these feasts and festivals, we have to do those to honor God. But the new Christians, the Gentiles, were saying, well, we want to worship Jesus on the day of the week that He rose from the dead, on what we would call Sunday, right? The first day of the week. And so there's complaining, right? One's too old-fashioned, one's too modern. Sounds kind of like today, right? And Paul wrote to the church in Rome, the church community there, and he had something familiar to say about this. He said in chapter 14 and verse 1, he starts off by saying, welcome those who are weak in the faith, but not for the purpose of quarreling over opinions. You see, they were arguing over what foods were okay to eat and which were not, right? Do we follow the law of Moses and eat kosher, or are we free to eat anything? But they also were arguing over what days to worship, saying that some days were better than others, and they were judging and condemning each other as a result of it. And verse 5, Paul talks about it. It says, some judge one day to be better than another, while others judge all days to be alike. But Paul says this, let all be fully convinced in their mind. Those who observe the day, observe it in honor of the Lord. Also those who eat in honor of the Lord, since they give thanks to God. And he's saying that in every situation, if your heart is right, then what you're doing is right. If I have a church service in my church community on Christmas Day and we do it to honor God, then praise God, we're doing it to honor Him. But if a family says, we're not going to attend that service, we're going to gather together as a family, and we're going to worship God around the Christmas tree and get our Bibles out and read the Christmas story, that also honors God. And praise God for that too. But what we have to be mindful not to do is what Paul says in verse 13 of this chapter. He says, let us therefore no longer pass judgment on one another, but resolve instead never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of another. So wherever your family falls in the celebration of the holiday, here's what I want to encourage you with. When we celebrate is not as important as how we celebrate. When we celebrate, do we do it in a building or do we do it in our homes? Do we do it on a particular day of the week, or do we meet a different time and gather together and honor God? When we celebrate is not near as important as our heart and how we celebrate. Because you can show up on Sunday morning, Christmas Day, sing all the songs and sit through all the services and still not have a right heart with God. And you can also skip out and be selfish and say, nope, I want to just rest in and not even think about why Jesus really is the reason for this season. You see, when we worship is not near as important as how we worship. What is our heart? So I want to encourage you as we go over the next few days of the holiday to ask yourself, what's my heart? When am I worshiping is not near as important as how I worship and also how I treat other people. Am I condemning or looking down? Am I judging somebody? Paul reminds us, hey, don't put a stumbling block in someone else's way. If their heart is right, rock and roll, let them do it. Don't judge and condemn each other. Because when we worship is not near as important as how we worship. And from my family to yours, man, Merry Christmas. Be blessed.